Then we will call this meeting to order. Everybody please rise and join me for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you. All right, let's jump into roll call. Jennifer?
Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
And Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Yes, I'm here via
Teleconference.
okay,
Thank you.
teleconference. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right. City Manager, do we have any late changes to the agenda?
No, we don't, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right. Very good. Let's move into public comment. Did anybody submit public comment in writing?
No, there is nothing in writing.
Okay. Very good. Jennifer, do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
No one has signed up. And
Anybody online?
if there's anyone in the online audience who would like to speak, please use the hand raise tool. Going once? Going twice? There are no public comments.
All right. No public comments tonight. Moving right into the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Anybody wish to remove anything from the consent calendar first? No, then I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, I move to excuse. I move to approve the consent calendar, item A and B.
Very good. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Consent calendar is approved. Moving into the public hearing for the Astound franchise agreement ordinance. City Manager Jeff Knighton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, and members of council. First one on the agenda tonight is for Astound Broadband LLC, and they currently have a telecommunications franchise with the city, approved under Ordinance 2628, adopted in August of 2013, and they have operated a telecommunications system within the city since that time. The new franchise agreement before you this evening has been negotiated with Astound Broadband and provides for a 10-year term expiring in 2033. And that's what I have for the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Very good. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Sonmore.
Hold up differently. Can I just ask?
Mike.
On the ordinance where it says whereas, and it talks about the broadband under the ordinance 2628, the term of which shouldn't it be expired on August 28, 2023? Because it's not ongoing, but it already expired. Or can I ask, does that have to just do with the date of the ordinance? It just seems like doesn't make sense.
We've been in negotiations with Astound for quite some time, and this is bringing it to council now before the end of the year so we can continue the franchise through 2033.
Very good.
This has been ongoing for nearly a year, negotiations with Astound and with Comcast.
So can I ask what's happened in September, October, November?
They've continued operating the same as they have been. This franchise, because it doesn't have a video component, does not have franchise fees pay and doable to the city.
Whereas the other one was 4,000, and so this one has no fees?
This one does not. The second one that you will hear tonight does.
Thank you.
And we'll clarify reasoning behind that when we get to the second one.
Yeah.
All right. We have a public hearing tonight. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Move to open the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. The public hearing is now open. Do we have any written comments on this matter? No written comments? Is anybody in the audience signed up to testify?
No written comments and no one has signed up to testify.
Very good. Anybody online?
If anyone online would like to comment on this particular item, please use the hand raise tool. Going once, going twice. There are no public comments.
All right, no public comments. Any further questions of staff before we close the public hearing? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. Public hearing is now closed. Any discussion on this matter? Or actually, we should put a motion on the table.
Actually, franchise agreements require 2 readings, so they're a motion just to advance to your December 21st meeting, at which time council will have an opportunity to vote.
Okay,
Can I just ask a question?
sure. We have a question. Councilmember
since it-
Sonmar.
Thank you. Since it came up, can you just say why it took so long to negotiate? And do we have any recourse to ever say no? It's always a good time to educate on franchise such as this.
So partially was due to quite a bit of staff turnover that council is aware of at the beginning of the year. The negotiations were started under one administration and then continued when I got here. That took a little while, as well as working with our consultant, River Oaks Communications, who does negotiations such as this for us. Comcast was actually started, the next one you'll hear, Comcast was actually started first, then Astound, and that's why it's before you now.
Sorry.
Additionally, as far as the second part of your question, we're lucky to have Lisa Marshall here from Kenyon Decent, who is sitting in tonight for Hillary. And Lisa is an expert on franchise agreements. So I would love to turn that over to her to answer the second part of your question.
All right, Lisa, can you help
Yes, good
enlighten
evening.
us?
Yes, could I ask you to repeat, the second part of your question?
Well, so the first part was, I was wondering why the contract it stopped in August. And I was wondering, basically, I should explain more, if it was due to anything's not going up on the polls or anything with telecommunications that they wanted that the city didn't want. And the second one is it's always a good time to educate on what we can and can't do for telecommunication franchises in the city. So we can't say no, but what are we able to negotiate on, and for fees, cost, the length, what we can say no to, what they can demand, what they can do with underground utilities, all that information. So if you're an expert on it, I got tons of questions, but I'm sure
Well, how
you'll
much
answer
time
them
do you
all.
have? It's very different in the telecommunications world than it is in the cable world, which we'll see in a few minutes. In the telecommunications world, the Telecommunications Act of 1996 is still in place. And the most recent directives from the FCC are issued in what we call reports and orders. And so we know that there's all sorts of prohibitions regarding barriers to entry. We have to treat providers similarly. And most recently, in fact, with the push out of 5G, those local agency rights, I'll call them local franchise authorities, LFAs, our prerogatives are fewer and fewer as the year goes by. In terms of the length of the time it takes to negotiate a franchise, I could probably add more to the first part of your question, but I'll stop and check in first. Regarding the second part of your question, it is often a long process that is not really the result of changes in technology, or I think you referred to things going up on the polls or trouble with things going up on the polls. It's typically things like turnover of staff, length of time to get parties together for franchise discussions, So I'm going to put the blame back on us and not the carrier or the technology. I know that there have been municipal agencies that we have worked with where franchise negotiations go on for some time, but the carriers continue to pay the fees that are due under the franchise, if any. And that is certainly the case with Comcast, which is up next.
Just a curiosity question. In contract, so the city, we wouldn't get, so usually when a contract ends, it ends and there's stuff you can and can't do. So it just automatically keeps rolling without.
Yes and no. The contracts very typically expire and leave a gap between the former franchise and a newly negotiated franchise. Because the franchises are permitting infrastructure in your right of way, and because it doesn't make sense for a municipal agency to tell those providers to take their stuff out of the right of way, because then your citizens wouldn't have telecommunication services or cable services, the parties will often continue under the same terms and conditions that they had under the expired franchise, and until they execute a new franchise, those terms and conditions in the former are just respected by both parties. I can't think of a situation in which a franchise expired and the parties tended to sort of freestyle, if you will, and do whatever they wanted. They tend to continue under those same conditions, terms and conditions.
So the city wouldn't be held liable for anything that could have broken down or failed and so
No,
I know the term, and this is the wrong term, the hold harmless part of it, but just that, that wasn't the term I was looking for, but so is there a certain amount of length that can go on for? I'm just thinking of contract law, so I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, in the franchise world, the police power that the city has over its right of way is your ultimate leverage. And that police power is granted by the Washington State Constitution. That means that if there is infrastructure in your right of way, the city really has full authority to either acquiesce to the presence of those facilities in your right of way or demand that they be removed. And there is no liability on that the city faces in not having a contract in place. I suppose in theory, a provider could come forward and say, we want to pay less than we did before. I haven't seen that happen. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen. But if it did, then, the city's response is, well, we don't want to pay more. So let's negotiate a franchise that works for both parties.
Good to know. Thank you very much.
Very good. All right. Any other questions before we move on? If not, so no action is needed. This will carry on to or do we need a motion?
I think a motion to advance it to the December 21st council meeting would be appropriate.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion for that. Councilmember, anybody? Murray?
So moved? No. I will move to continue what? I wasn't taking note.
Advance to the December 21st regular council meeting.
I move to advance to this topic to the December 21st council meeting.
Very good. We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry. This item will advance to the December 21st agenda, and we will look forward to hearing it again then. So moving on, we've got the next franchise agreement, the public hearing for Comcast franchise agreement. City Manager.
Thank you. And these are, just as an aside, these are a little bit different because they can't go directly to the consent calendar. They need to be heard twice. So a little bit different structure. But moving on to the Comcast franchise agreement, on July 6, 2004, with the approval of Ordinance 2360, the city granted a non-exclusive franchise to Comcast of California, Colorado, Texas, Washington, Inc., which is what they were known at that time, that allowed the operation of a cable system within the city right-of-way. And Comcast has operated a cable system within the city since that time. In this agreement, it is, again, a 10-year term expiring in 2033, and Comcast Cable Communications, which is what they're known as now, will pay a franchise fee equal to 5% of gross revenues quarterly to the city. And gross revenues are defined in section 1.28 of the attachment to this memo. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, City Manager. Could you, for clarity and to make sure everybody understands why one had the fee and the other, and this one has the fee and the other one does not?
Sure. So
no matter what it's used for.
The previous one does not provide cable services. It provides, I believe it's broadband services. The franchise fee is only applicable to the cable part. Commonly, and Lisa can check me if I'm incorrect, but commonly it's if franchise fees are charged on the video component of the distribution of media.
Very good. Does everybody understand? Do we have any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Councilmember Sonmore.
I'm curious too. So the only thing that's changed in the whole 49 contract is the 5% of the gross revenue quarterly to the city?
We were under the franchise that was adopted in 2004. We were also receiving 5%, and that is the max, if I'm correct on that we are able to charge on the gross revenue of Comcast within our jurisdiction.
And under that 2004 contract, was there any monies going to communications? Because we used to talk about the $40,000 that we got that we could use to, at one time, to spend on televising our meetings.
Yeah. Those are PEG fees, is what they're called, and they are to broadcast local government deliberations on various matters to the community. And we are working with Comcast to get that done. What we're doing at the moment is working with Comcast's construction project management to get the cabling done so that we can get our signal out to their dish. Right now, this room doesn't have that capability, but that's an ongoing project.
The contract I'm remembering was through Edmonds. We used it through Edmonds Community College because I'm wondering, since we have YouTube now, can we get those funds to sustain our equipment instead of the signaling? But I know it's Comcast, but I'm just wondering, can they offer us anything else now that where everybody's doing different modes of communicating stuff, and can we use that money for something else?
And I don't believe so, but I am not 100% sure. So, Lisa, if you could help answer that question.
Typically, the pass-through amount, which is the fee that you're speaking of, it is a per subscriber fee. It's usually somewhere between 25 cents and 40 cents. And it's typically used to supply revenue to a capital project, which would be a PEG channel or equipment. If there is a desire to use that in a way that doesn't fall within the strict definition of that capital project, I think that's something we would have to circle back and ask Comcast about. In terms of our municipal clients, they pretty uniformly have used them for education government channels. I've not heard of anyone attempting to use them for something else, but it doesn't mean that we can't. We'd also need to go back to the definition section of the franchise and make sure what it is the city is desiring to do with those fees fall within the definition.
So you bring up two questions. So should we look at the definition section now, since we're about to sign it, to see, or is it too late? And the other question was the fees between 25 cents and 40 cents. So I'll be greedy. How come we can't get the full amount? How do you negotiate the full amount?
Well, typically Comcast would like to know what the rationale is for the increase in capital contributions. In another municipality, we represent the municipality wanted to go up to 40%, and it was important for Comcast to have an answer for people who called and asked why their fees went up. So that required us to provide a rationale in terms of the capital expenditure, what we're spending it on. Really because it's the customer that's paying for it. So yes, the answer is typically yes, but it would be helpful to have a specific item or service or capital project in mind that you'd like to spend the fees on. Otherwise, it's being collected, and collecting fees without a rationale can sometimes result in challenges by ratepayers, which we would not want to see here. And I think you asked something else, but I'm going to let you.
Oh, just about
repeat
the, that certain section of the contract.
Oh, the definition section?
Yes, please.
Well, I can assure you that getting Comcast to change a definition that's in probably 100 different franchises is going to be a heavy lift. So it would be my recommendation to pass it as written. And if we'd like to inquire of Comcast about sort of some flexibility within that definition, particularly if you have something in mind you'd like to spend the fees on, we'd be happy to do that. I've been working with the same two Comcast representatives for about 25 or 30 years. We have a good working relationship, and I'm sure they would be happy to explore that with us. But I would recommend signing the version that's before you this evening.
Right. Well, I appreciate your knowledge. Thank you.
Very good. Do we have any other questions? If not, then we will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
You want to do it again?
Councilmember Sonmore,
I move to open the public hearing.
do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, public hearing is now open. Do we have anybody signed up?
No, no one has signed up to speak.
Anybody in the online audience?
If there's anyone in the online audience who would like to speak to this item, please use the hand raise tool. Going once, going twice. There are no public comments.
Very good. Any written comments submitted?
No written comments.
Very good. So no public comment. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing? Councilmember Ryan.
I make a motion to close public hearing.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Do we, so let's vote on it. All those in favor of closing public hearing?
Aye.
Opposed? Very good.
Aye.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. All right. Do we have, now is this one another one that's going to advance to the 21st, correct?
Correct.
All right, very good. So any final questions before we have a motion to advance this item to the, no questions. Very good. Then I'll entertain a motion to advance this item to the December 21st agenda item. That is Councilmember Woodard.
I move to advance this ordinance to the December 21st, 2023 regularly scheduled council meeting for further consideration.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those, any discussion? All right, no, hearing no discussion, then all those in favor of approving this motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Going to give you a second, okay. I assume that was an aye there. All those opposed? All right, the item is moved to the advance to the December 21st agenda. All right, with that, we are moving on to the approval of the Snow 911 lease agreement, Amendment 2. We have Recreation Parks Director Jeff Betts.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. So as mentioned, tonight's item, but is to review and approve the Second Amendment to an existing interlocal agreement with Snohomish County 911. So just some brief background information on this interlocal agreement. The organization prior to Snohomish County 911 was called SNOCOM, and that was the entity that was first entered into this interlocal agreement in 1983 with both the cities of Linwood and Mountlake Terrace, as the operations facility was jointly operated at that time. SNOCOM operated an emergency telecommunications center, a 911, for South Snohomish County, This interlocal agreement allowed Snowcom to utilize 7,900 square feet of space at no cost at the operations facility. This agreement was for 40 years, but also a lot has happened since then. Mountlake Terrace purchased the entire operations center, buying out Linwood in 2010. And after that, Snowcom merged with Snowpack to form Snohomish County 911. Since that time, Snohomish County 911 and the city are currently negotiating an extension to that interlocal agreement and just need a little bit more time. We did previously extend this in the First Amendment in June to end this December. So we are getting closer to finalizing it, but we do need a few more months. So this Amendment 2 gives us 3 more months to finalize that new lease agreement. So staff are recommending that tonight council does approve that extension. Do you have any questions of me?
I'm looking at the 2000 agreement where it talks about Linwood and Mountlake Terrace, but on the, not the amended one, the draft, why do we have to say again, whereas the city of Mountlake Terrace assumes the rights of the city of Linwood under the agreement? Because we don't really address, I'm trying to see if we address the agreement from 2000, and that's an amendment up above, but that was a long time ago. So why do we still have to keep it in the whereas?
Well, the reason is that the original agreement included Linwood, Mountlake Terrace, and Snohomish 911, or Snowcom, I should say, back then. So there hasn't been a new agreement since Linwood actually was bought out. So this agreement we're working on now would be just between the city and Snohomish 911, but the previous one was a 3-way agreement. The one that we're currently operating under is a 3-way agreement.
But this one will be a 2-way agreement?
Correct.
So
the new one will be the new one that we're negotiating currently.
So then how are we assuming the rights of the city of Linwood under the agreement? Wouldn't they assume their own? I mean, well, they're not renting, but I mean, what are we assuming?
So in the original agreement, there is language in there that says if whoever is the successor to that agreement, which we are the successor for Linwood since we bought them out. So Linwood has no rights in the agreement anymore since we purchased the rest of the operations facility. So the current agreement does list Linwood and Mountlake Terrace and Snohomish or Snowcom. But since we did buy them out, it's really, we're assuming their interest because the agreement lists them, but we bought them out. So we are now the primary in that agreement.
So the way I understand it then is you listed it there because the amendment is still listed up above in the title. And then maybe the next time we assume this agreement, Linwood wouldn't even be in here because we purchased that property so long ago.
Right.
Thank
you.
you.
Absolutely correct.
And this is just a little tidbit. On a side note, I had to call 911 in the last couple of months. And I don't know if it's a new thing through Snowcom that they offer or Mountlake Terrace, but I got a survey. And I was so surprised to get a survey. But after I called 911, when I was outside, Mountlake Terrace Police Department, I guess, called me back. And so I went to call them back, and it goes to a recording. And so I thought that was a little odd, but I guess you would just call 911 back and say it's a non-emergency. But do we get survey results from Snowcom 911 or for the police department? I've never seen the survey results.
I'm not sure of that. Maybe if the city manager knows that or it's something that we could find out, we could definitely look into that.
Yeah, I've never seen where we've seen compiled survey results from Snow 911, but we can ask.
Yeah, this is just, it came from the city of Mountlake Terrace. I mean, I could look it up just to make sure, but I'd never seen that. You've seen it before? Yeah, I filled out several. Oh, I was just wondering, how long ago? Huh. Yep, so.
All right, very good. Any further questions? If not, this is not a public hearing. All we need to do is put a motion on the table and approve it tonight. Do we have a motion, Councilmember Woodard?
Motion to authorize the city manager to sign the attached amendment to the interlocal agreement between the city and Snohomish County 911.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion? Then we will we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we have a motion to proceed, or a motion has been approved to proceed.
Thank you.
All right, very good, thank you. Then, next up is the presentation of the comprehensive plan update with Senior Planner Jonathan Morales. Jonathan, take the stage. Sorry, while you're coming up, let's take a
Quick recess.
3-minute break. All right, we're back online. All right, Jonathan, take it away.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Matsumoto Wright, Mayor Pro Tem Wall, members of council, members of the public. My name is Jonathan Morales. I'm a senior planner with the city of Mountlake Terrace. Today, we're excited to present what's the first in a series of council briefings on the comprehensive plan update, our Vision 2044 comp plan update. I'm excited to introduce our consultant team representatives. So we have Sierra Carson from OTAC, who's our prime consultant, and David Fisk, who you haven't met yet, is part of Leland Consulting Group, and they're leading our housing analysis, housing needs assessment work, and analysis of some of the House bills legislation that we'll be reviewing as part of this comprehensive plan update. So I'll pass it on to Sierra.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us here this evening. I'm happy to be back in these council chambers to present about some of the work that we've been doing as part of the comprehensive plan update. So our quick agenda tonight, we do have a just short briefing just to recap what the comp plan process is. Just a couple slides on that just to give a refresh because I know it's been a couple months since we've talked about this process. We'll give an overview of the SEPA scoping process, present some findings from the open house that was held here on November 13th, and just give a quick update on where our engagement and our vision poll sort of ended up as we move on to the next phase of public engagement for the process. And then David will give a nice presentation on an intro to housing, the housing element, and sort of a summary of the conversations we've been having with the Comp Plan Advisory Group. And there will be time for questions and discussions at the end. So on the comp plan process and timeline, just as a quick refresh, the comprehensive plan is that 20-year vision that's talking about sort of what is going to happen, how does the city guide its growth and investment over the next 20 years. It's important to meet these requirements and to ensure that the city continues to be eligible for funding, both from the Growth Management Act, from the state, from Puget Sound Regional Council. It's important for us to make sure that the city is up to date with meeting all those different requirements that have come from state law and regional guidance. The plan will, guide decisions on infrastructure, housing, and more. We'll be coming to you with modules on all the different topic areas covered by the comprehensive plan as we head through this spring. So keep an eye out. We'll be here, but tonight we're really going to focus in on housing. And this plan also acts as the framework to guide all of the other important city plans as we talked about, transportation and parks and utilities. This is really that core city plan to guide the future. So just a quick update on our timeline. We've been working on this plan since mid-2023. We're hitting that sort of end of 23 point, beginning of 2024, we're going to be moving from sort of that analyze and background phase to really preparing a draft of the full comprehensive plan. I have another slide in here about schedule, specifically for you all, so keep tuned, but we'll be working on public engagement throughout the process with wrapping up this whole comp plan update by the end of the year next year in 2024. So here is a slightly, and I do apologize, this is a slightly out-of-date table here. We will be bringing different modules to you all over the next couple of months. In February, we will be back to talk about sort of the introduction and the vision of the plan, sub-area planning, and ongoing work on land use and housing. April, we'll be back talking about land use and housing, economic vitality. In June, we'll be talking about environment, recreation, parks, and open space. And then I do believe we're coming back again that summer to talk about transportation utilities. But you will be receiving that full draft plan by September, and we'll be wrapping up adoption in October instead. So based on sort of feedback that we got the last time we had this conversation, we've moved up our timeline slightly to make sure that there's enough time for deliberation and that you're seeing the document slightly earlier in the year. Please do keep in mind that as we go through this process, you'll be seeing preliminary content for all sections of the comp plan as we bring these modules to you. So there'll be plenty of time to talk through and learn about the content that's going into the plan before it's completely compiled into one draft plan. So that's sort of our update on the comp plan process. This next section is to give an update on the environmental impact process, our EIS scoping meeting. So the State Environmental Policy Act, which you might be familiar with, is the process that's used to identify and analyze the environmental impacts of government decisions. This applies to project actions such as new development, and as well as non-project actions such as the comprehensive plan or other large planning processes. An environmental impact statement will be required for any proposal that's likely to have significant environmental impact. And this is a process we can use to identify and then mitigate those probable impacts. The reason why we do scoping is to, identify the items that we want to make sure are evaluated as impacts in the environmental impact statement. And we can use this process to narrow down the issues to those that we know are significant. It's also an opportunity to have public comment. So this is a sort of screenshot of the determination of significance and request for comments that went out to the city's noticing list. So we are looking forward to getting comments back from different agencies and providing sort of a summary of comments heard. So this determination of significance was issued on November 13th, and the deadline for comments will be December 13th. As part of this process, the city hosted a in-person open house. This was hosted on November 13th here at City Hall. I think we can all agree that it was a rousing success. We had, I think, this whole room pretty much packed with people. It was pretty great to see just the support from the community and the input that was given from the community on the different questions that we were asking. So the open house, we had an educational component where we had different boards that talked about sort of giving background on what a comprehensive plan is and what our previous planning efforts that the city has taken forth, such as the town center plan. And we split up the room into different sort of topic areas. So we asked questions specific to the different elements in the comprehensive plan, such as housing and land use, transportation, parks, economic vitality, and public facilities and utilities. We also had a section that allowed people to sort of give comments about the neighborhood or the sub-area that they lived in. So we have just some fun pictures of sort of the comments and sticky notes that we received from folks during the open house. And I do have just a couple of notes just on the themes that were heard. So as we looked at the housing and land use boards, some of the challenges that people noted as feedback that we heard was, there's challenges with affordability, there's challenges with the attainability of housing, and there were also concerns about there being resources for the unhoused. So that came up on a couple different notes. And there was also support and some interest for, talking about having variety of housing, having more housing located near transit and amenities, and, having a diversity of housing that includes, smaller homes and ADUs as well. On economic vitality, participants expressed that, they would love to see more small businesses within the community, new businesses that may include a grocery store in town center, cafes, daycares, pop-ups for small business. There was just a lot of, people wanted a place to go eat and a place to go, get a cup of coffee and a place to go buy a fun small good. On transportation, there was a lot of support actually for, more walkable and bikeable routes. We have a couple of fun maps that we're currently analyzing about places where the community expressed that they wanted improvements for bicycle pedestrian safety. Frequently mentioned streets were, 236th, 220th Street Southwest, 44th, 48th, 66th. So these are comments that we can take into mind as we go through sort of what the plan will call for. So we just got a lot of comments here. And we will be compiling a full packet of everything that was heard at the open house, any other comment that's been heard from the city as part of the public comment period for the scoping comment period. In addition to the online house that was open, that was held here on November 13th, we've also been hosting an online open house. The online open house has all of the same information that was presented at the in-person open house. It's a web page that's linked on the city's website. It's been sent out on the city's social media page, as well as to the city's, will be sent out on the city's Notify Me server as well. And this online open house allows people to provide comment on all the same questions that were asked here in person, and give some background and some information about what the planning process is. So we will continue to collect comments here that will enter the official record for the SEPA comment period up until November 13th. But this resource will continue to stay open, and we will continue to collect comment on these important topics and important questions as we move through the process. And then just to recap where we've been on all of our other engagement, I believe last time we presented some of the initial results that we received from the visioning survey. That visioning survey is now closed. We closed that at the end of November. We ended up getting a total of 268 responses, which is a really great response rate. And we're really excited to really dive into the results of that survey and come back to you in a couple months to give that final update on what was heard about the vision, but overall very positive. And we've also seen, if you've been around the community, we have these lovely posters that have gone up in different local businesses with a link that leads back to the city's webpage for Vision 2040, which will have continued opportunities for engagement and public participation. So that is the end of my portion of the presentation. I will pass this over to David.
Great. Should we move that over? Perfect. Or do I hold on to this one? Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Very nice to meet you. As Jonathan indicated, my name is David Fisk. I'm an associate with Leland Consulting Group, and so we're working as sub-consultants to OTAC with a focus on the housing element, but we're also working with you together on the economic vitality and as well as the economic development strategic plan that's ongoing. So from the schedule Sierra shared with you all, I think we'll be back here in February as well as April. Maybe be seeing a lot of us, me and my colleagues over the next coming months. So very happy to be here. I've been told I've got about 15 or 20 minutes to go through some high-level takeaways from some of our work thus far, and then we'll have plenty of time, I think, at the end for any questions or discussion. So just really quickly, going to review at a high level what the process is for updating your housing element and sort of what the components that go into that, especially with a lot of the new legislative requirements that have come around within for this update cycle. Going to hit on some of those points. And then, as I said, share some key takeaways from the housing needs assessment that we've been working on, as well as land capacity analysis. And that's just to sort of to set up what's to come as we work through the update of your housing element. So, at a very high level, and because this is the first time I'm here speaking with you all, I thought it'd be good to just sort of lay out the whole process here. These 7 elements, or sort of pieces of your element, this comes from the guidance document provided by the Department of Commerce on how to update your housing element. And so, as I mentioned, we've already worked on your housing needs assessment, be sharing some takeaways with you today. Land capacity analysis, what we've done to date in sort of assessing what does your future housing capacity look like over the next 20 years under your current zoning, what could be expected in terms of what's possible in terms of housing production. It's in progress because as we work through potential updates and changes to your land development code, that capacity, of course, will change, and so we'll be further analyzing that down the road. Adequate provisions is a new element or new requirement as part of this comp plan process. I've got a separate slide on that I'll hit on in just a moment. As well as racially disparate impacts. That's a new component and requirement for this, or based on the recent legislation in HB 1220, assessing impacts especially related to housing, but sort of how it relates to the other elements as well. And I have a separate slide to touch on that. We've begun some of the assessment related to that, and it will be integrated into our further discussions around housing in particular and further engagement that's ongoing in the process in general. Following this today, and actually we had a meeting last night with the CPAG, we're going to be diving in more thoroughly into reviewing the existing housing element goals and policies, what needs to be updated based on the new legislative requirements, ensuring there's compliance with countywide and PSRC planning policies, and then coming back to you all with recommended new updated goals, policies, and of course implementation strategies, which is really the most important thing, I think, towards the later stages of the process. So that's laying it all out there. I won't spend too much time on this because I've got a separate slide later that sort of breaks this down a little bit further. But in terms of land capacity analysis, as I said, we've been looking at what is the capacity under current zoning. And when we're talking about, these figures, or this chart on the right here, is breaking down this citywide growth allocation, right, that's been handed down from the county and state. That citywide number is down there at the bottom, and it amounts to, a total of 34,710 residents by 2044, which is then converted to housing units of 16,816. This is the total number. So what we're talking about is planning for a net new number of housing units by 2044 of just over 7,600 housing units. It's broken down, though, in this due to the new legislation, by these income brackets that are shown in this chart here. So that is, again, a new requirement, planning for housing needs by income. And so when we do our land capacity analysis, we're assessing that by these different income brackets, and I'll get into how that's done and sort of the different housing types that fall into these different buckets here in just a moment. Adequate provisions is, so while we were looking at land capacity, right, which is potential for new housing, adequate provisions is Commerce is tasking every city at looking at your historic housing production trends and seeing if those trends carry forward, will you be likely to hit those targets that have been granted and allocated to every city? If not, then it triggers a process where you essentially go through a process of assessing different barriers to production of housing. So that's looking at your development regulations, process obstacles, land availability, funding gaps, et cetera. So that's a process we'll be going through as well, depending on the analysis we're doing around those production trends. And racially disparate impacts. So this is an important new piece of the legislation, specifically related to housing, understanding how BIPOC minority populations are impacted by your current and future housing policy and situation, giving special consideration to these populations when we're crafting our goals, policies, and implementation strategies, as well as engaging with these populations and members of your community throughout the process. So that is ongoing, and when we come back to share with CPAG, with Planning Commission, with you all, we'll be breaking down more of that work and how it relates to sort of the overall housing element and the recommendations that we'll be working through together. And so just to sum all of that up, next steps following the CPAG meeting last night as well as today, we'll be diving more into those adequate provisions assessment, as I mentioned, and really digging into your existing housing element and drafting updated goals and policies, which then we'll be coming back and vetting and discussing with the CPAG and Planning Commission in January and February, and then bringing back to you also later in February, I believe was what the schedule indicated that Sierra shared. All right. So that's the process part. Now to get into a summary of some of our work. So looking at some of the housing needs assessment and land capacity analysis, I'm going to hit on just sort of the high level points here and try and move through this pretty quickly. But yeah, if there are questions when we get to the end, happy to go back and clarify anything. So first and foremost, we're looking at population growth that's expected within the city. And so if we're looking at those growth targets that have been allocated, what that amounts to is essentially a rate of growth that is 4 times that of what has been seen in the city over the last 15 years. And so, of course, that is important when we're thinking about housing growth. The region and the city, as Sierra mentioned from some of the survey or open house findings, are already experiencing a housing crunch and issues around affordability and attainability. And as more people are expected to move into the city, that will become more and more of an issue, potentially, if there aren't measures taken to address that. Also, Mountlake Terrace is considered moderate income community. So within Snohomish County, I'm sure you're all aware, Mountlake Terrace median household income is a bit lower than the county's overall. So again, as more residents are expected to move in, that housing crunch will be felt further. Housing costs could be expected to continue to rise. And so a community such as this, where that doesn't have as much of a high income population, of course, there will be further pressure and issues around affordability. Making it more important to seek solutions for achieving housing diversity and other options across different affordability brackets. Looking at that in a little more real terms, so this here shows 4 different household income levels and what these households could afford if they were trying to buy a home. So the median household income today, or as of 2023, is $91,000. That median household income could afford a home just under $350,000. And I think we can all agree here that there is no home on the market, or we're not going to find a home in Mountlake Terrace at that price today. The median home price in Mountlake Terrace today is just under $600,596, and a household would need to make roughly $155,000 to afford that home today. And that is less than 20% of the current households in the city. So again, that's just showing that this is already a challenge, and potentially a challenge that will increase as the years go by if measures are not taken. Pointing out, though, that there are some units that are on the market that are affordable to households at that median income level, primarily condos that are for sale within the city, as well as some of the townhomes that have existed or been built in recent years. So again, looking at different housing types that can be attainable at different incomes is going to be very important. So these 2 graphs here, and I'm throwing a lot of data at you all, but on the left here is showing the median rents and how those have increased over the last decade or more, and comparing that to the county and the state. And you can see the trend is more or less the same, though in Mountlake Terrace it's a little bit higher than you're seeing, or in terms of the total rent there, than you're seeing in the county and the state. on the right, and this really sort of gets at the crux of the problem that not only Mountlake Terrace is experiencing, but elsewhere in the region and really nationally in many cities, that as rents have increased, as well as home values, median household incomes have not increased at nearly the same rate. And so what this is showing here is around 2015, rents and especially home values increased at a much more rapid rate than that of household incomes. So that sort of pressure around affordability has become even more of a challenge as that has occurred. So now breaking down your existing housing stock, Mountlake Terrace has a relatively diverse housing stock actually compared to many of your neighbors and others in the region. Still predominantly single family at 57%, but there's actually a rather large number of housing units that fall within that middle housing area of 2 to 4 units. Shown on the subsequent slide though that many of those units are older, have not been built much in recent years. And when we're talking about age as well, this graph on the right here shows that compared to the county, a lot of the homes in Mountlake Terrace are considerably older, with most of the housing, or I say a majority of the housing built here prior to the 90s. And so that's one reason why some homes in Mountlake Terrace are more affordable, because they're older housing stock, but also that many of them may be experiencing issues of maintenance and perhaps some homeowners unable to pay for some of that maintenance or upkeep over the years as this housing stock continues to age. So that's housing today. This is looking at production trends, so permitting actually, and this is data that comes from the census, which is not a perfect data set, but it's sort of the best that we have in showing the trends of what's been built over the last number of decades. And I mentioned, so 11% of your existing housing falls in that 2 to 4 unit range, right? But what you can see here is after 2001, very few, virtually none, according to this data, has been built. And so when we're talking again about diversity of housing options, there's not been any of that type of housing that's been built in recent years. However, I know there has been a good deal of townhomes as well as some cottage homes that have been built, and those within these data sets would have been captured in the yellow bars there, counting as single family dwellings. The other thing that stands out here, of course, there was a real lull in housing production between 2001 through 2012, when there was a big spike in multifamily, which is the blue. And then, of course, in recent years, both in the town center and in Terrace Station, been considerable multifamily development that's been permitted. But again, not much sort of in between there. So this map is sort of setting up the last few slides we have, which is sharing the results of our land capacity analysis. So looking at what's here today, what's been built. Now looking forward, this map shows the buildable lands of basically the parcels in the city that have been identified as either vacant or redevelopable as part of the buildable lands report. So that's looking at vacancy, but then looking at improvement to land value ratio and assessing which of these areas are underutilized that could potentially see or be ripe for redevelopment. And the pink parcels here are projects that are pending or have been built since 2020, which is when the base year of assessment for meeting your targets is set. So those contain a considerable amount of new housing that would be counted towards your targets, but they are removing that from the capacity assessment because they've been built on since this buildable lands was first made. So what stands out here really is that the vast majority of the available land based on this assessment is within your town center, right? There's very little outside of that. And so when we're talking about trying to increase potentially housing diversity and options, there is a relatively limited availability of land in addressing that. I'm sorry? I've got just a couple more slides if you wouldn't mind, but if there's a burning question. Okay, I'll finish up. Okay. So back to this graph that we showed, and just to explain a little bit further how these income bands are understood or sort of broken down when we think about future housing capacity. And this is again based on the way that this is framed and the guidance that's provided from the Department of Commerce. So really what we're looking at are these three different income brackets, from 0 to 80% area median income, homes that could be affordable to a moderate income of 80 to 120, and then to households of higher income of 120 plus. There is also that red bar there, as well as the one on the far right of emergency housing, as well as permanent supportive housing, which are handled separately in the way that we sort of assess capacity. But looking at that a little bit further, and I know this is a bit hard maybe to see because there's a lot of information in this table, but essentially the way that we assess capacity is by looking at your different zoning in the city, what types of housing could be permitted or built in those zones, and based on historic trends and existing prices, and sort of a general understanding of the types of homes that are affordable to different types of households, those zones and what can be built there are then essentially broken down by those three brackets of income that were on that previous slide. So for example, if you're looking at your moderate density zones that permit townhomes and duplexes, it's assumed that those would likely be affordable within that moderate income of 80 to 120 AMI. And because it's atypical of those types of homes to be subsidized, to be truly affordable, that's where those would be counted within the land capacity assessment that I'm going to share on this next slide. So when we break it down, all of those sort of steps that I just shared, at a high level, or what we're looking at here is that Mountlake Terrace has a surplus of capacity for units serving extremely low and low income households. And why that is essentially most of your capacity, again, being in the town center, is within higher density zones that account for multifamily housing types. And so that's where the majority of the new housing capacity would lie. And it's assumed that those would be affordable or more affordable to a lower income household. So then there is a deficit based on this assessment, both within the moderate income as well as higher income households. And we saw from that graph on the 2 slides ago, it's expected that a fairly considerable number of higher income households are going to be demanding housing in the city going forward. So why is this? Again, there's very little redevelopable land outside of the town center in areas where these types of housing could be built. And predominantly because existing regulations don't adequately allow for some of those more diverse, especially ownership housing types that could fill the need of some of these more moderate and higher income households. So a lack of capacity for townhomes, duplexes potentially, or cottage clusters, or other housing types beyond that, triplexes, fourplexes, condominiums are not something that are built much in general in Washington. So that's sort of where we're at in that assessment. And so to conclude on that, what does this mean? So right, demand for housing is expected to continue growing as the city and region continues to grow. The county is assuming that Mountlake Terrace will feel the pressure of higher income earners, right? That was sort of the highest number within those income brackets of the expected need of future capacity. And because of the deficit of land to meet that projected need based on existing zoning, essentially without additional supply, right, prices will continue to rise most likely beyond what the average resident currently can't afford a home here, but that would potentially increase. So where we're at is a need to encourage different housing types, at least in terms of meeting the capacity at those different levels. So what this is not saying, or at least not the intention of this sort of process laid out by Commerce in this analysis of capacity, is that the city needs to build more single-family homes to meet that capacity, because there's frankly not space to do that beyond city limits today. So what are some of the other options of exploring to meet that expected need or demand is one of the big questions that we are sort of faced with in updating this housing element and moving forward to address housing challenges in the city. And of course, with this increasing supply or growth, we also need to think about the potential for displacement, the issues around affordability more generally. Newer homes don't tend to be affordable unless there are other measures taken to achieve affordability. But again, there are various housing types that can be relatively affordable compared to, say, a single-family home or a luxury townhome. And so are there opportunities to achieve more diversity within your future housing stock? And so the last thing to lay out here, this is just from our meeting yesterday. So we were grappling with this question with the members of the advisory group, and had a mapping activity where we essentially asked, okay, if there needs to be future growth within the city, where does it make sense for that to happen, and how? What kind of growth and housing types make the most sense where? And so at a high level, these are sort of the takeaways that we took forward and that we'll be taking forward into refining into potential different growth scenarios and what that would look like in terms of updating in zoning and other regulations and into your goals and policies and implementation strategies that we'll be bringing back to you later on in the process. But support generally from members on the group for increasing diversity of housing because of those options for a healthier mix of affordability and needing to meet those growth targets. Looking for increased potential for mixed use and multifamily development. So there's been a lot of that that's already been developed, but would it make sense to increase the potential for that, especially around your existing commercial nodes? So looking at some of the CB, the community business areas within the city, as those are already closer to existing amenities and neighborhoods. We're also talking about, so beyond larger multifamily buildings, what sort of denser housing types may make sense within single-family neighborhoods, and where would that make the most sense? The legislative requirements require Mountlake Terrace to allow 2 dwelling units, so a duplex on every residential lot. But frankly, that wouldn't be enough. The production of duplexes would most definitely not be adequate to meet that target. And so what other forms of housing could make sense? And so there was a lot of discussion around, well, regional goals and policies, and just to do good planning, locating that closer to the light rail, radiating out more from your town center, potential for expanding that RST transitional zone, which is mostly a townhome zone today, but also exploring potential of allowing up to 4 units on a residential lot in some parts of the city, especially again close to light rail and transit. And then on that note of risks of displacement and affordability, there were a number of members of the group that noted special consideration needs to be given to the existing affordable apartments within the city, especially up in the northern section of the city, as well as the mobile home parks that exist, because those are places that have affordable ownership opportunities. And the city already does have a unique mobile home zone, which not all cities have that, which in some ways preserves that as a unique land use, but it doesn't mean it's completely exempt from risk of redevelopment or displacement. So, but that's a real big challenge, and something, and talking about displacement and affordability more generally. So something that we'll be working together with city staff, advisory group, and coming up with real tangible strategies that we think could work in a city like Mountlake Terrace, because it is unique to every single community and how to address these sort of challenges. So that is all I've got from my part, and I think the rest of our time can be spent on discussions and questions.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Before we go into questions, I wanted to offer Councilmember Woodard an opportunity to comment as our representative on CPAG.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Much of what I heard just now is what we did yesterday. It's been really interesting. The last time that I gave the report, I said they were storming and norming, and I'd say they've moved beyond that now, and it looked like they were having really good discussion. You know, they've had a lot of questions, so I wasn't in the room yesterday. I was actually online with one of the students, and we had a really good conversation just in general. So I'm not quite sure I'd add anything other than folks seem really engaged, a little more patient now. There was a little bit of angst because you have a really, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a wide range of expertise and novice in the room. And they're doing, I think you're doing as best you can, but I think it's a wonderful job of finding that happy middle ground to keep people moving forward, but not frustrate people who are like, I heard this, I know this, or I live this in many cases. So in that regard, I think it's going as well as can be. This was my second time hearing this, and I will say you did a better job today. At least maybe I was more familiar with it. But I will say it's a lot of density. And so, you know, this group is experiencing this in live time, and so I'm not quite sure when they come back the next time how that transfers forward. You know, we hear it a lot, so I'm like, it's definitely helpful, but I'm not sure how that's going to play out in the long run because it is kind of splotchy as we move forward, and that's by design. We have to cover a lot of ground, so hopefully some of that's useful.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Woodard. All right. Do we have any questions on the or further discussion on the presentation and where we're at? Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you. So just so council and everyone knows, I do my best not to engage. I just try to sit and listen because that way we're not influencing because we have our own time. That said, something that I wanted to say yesterday that I am now sharing here, and I don't know if this is for you all as much as it's for this council with the exception of, no, actually you'd have been on the Planning Commission, so this is you as well. About 2 years ago, under a different city manager, at our retreat, council retreat, we entertained the idea of pallet shelters. And I'm just saying that because as much as we keep talking about housing diversity, we're still talking about people who can pay money. And that's not everybody in my community. And I don't want to leave those folks who are in my community without that capacity completely out of the discussion. Which is just my way of saying I don't know where that fits in here because as we were talking about the mobile homes, the reality is we can do as much as we can, but if the owner sells, right? So it's one of those where it's like, okay, if that's true, and it is, then what can we do from this side to make that a disincentive to sell, but again, pulling back and thinking about other options of serving this community. And it seems like this is the time to do that, right? So I just kind of wanted to put that forward. And again, I don't know if that's to you all, where does this fit, or if that's to us where it fits, or if it's all of us. But just wanted to remind us that it sounded like we were interested in exploring options. And then again, we had a whole lot happen, but here we are now.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for reminding us. All right, Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, all three of you, for the presentation and all of the work. It's exciting. I had a chance to come to the open house, and it was really amazing to see so many people here and engaging and interested in both learning about the process and sharing their thoughts about the vision for Mountlake Terrace. So I'm excited to start digging into this and appreciate you keeping us apprised. And I appreciate the timeline as well. So. A couple of questions. I think one of the questions that had come up when we had our kickoff was around some of the new housing regulations and how we are considering those in terms of population and integration into our planning process, given we're kind of right on a borderline between some of those kick in at 25,000. I think when we just got our most recent census feedback, we were just under, we were 24,000 and some change. So I guess I'm curious, I'm not sure exactly where that has gone from there. So I guess when you talk about integration of some of the newer regulations that we've received from the state, I guess I'd be curious about that aspect in particular.
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. I think today we we decided not to sort of go into the nuts and bolts of the new legislation, because that is something that we will be, again, doing a more thorough audit of the existing comp plan, and then making sure as we develop the new housing element that we're not to say ticking all those boxes, but making sure that we are covering all those bases of the new legislation. And there's a lot of it, so it's a lot to cover, and we'll definitely cover it in greater detail as we bring back more information in the future. But to what you were just speaking to specifically, so yeah, because Mountlake Terrace is under that 25,000 population threshold, it's considered a tier 3 city within the region, which means that in terms of the middle housing legislation, House Bill 1110, requirements are only for, I shouldn't say only, it's a big change for everyone in the region, but 2 units on every residential lot, as opposed to if you were over 25,000, then it would still be 2 units, but then requirement to allow for 4 units within a quarter mile of high capacity transit. So because you are right on the cusp, you're technically in that tier 3 zone. There was discussion last night actually about that specifically, and where does Mountlake Terrace fit into that? And you have a light rail station, right? So, but not required to allow that additional density there by the legislation.
I guess curiosity, since you are familiar with this space, I guess.
As much as I can be.
Well, I appreciate that. So I guess in thinking about that, because I think that is something that for me is a question, and I don't have an answer, but I would love to better understand. We are going to be over that 25,000 threshold probably in the not too distant future. And so I guess in thinking about this, extensive planning process that we only go through every 10 years. I guess I'm curious about the value in at least looking at, and I don't know if that's the only, the only impact is that one singular thing, or if there are other impacts, but I guess it would be helpful for me to, I guess, both hear maybe like philosophy now, and then maybe to have some conversation as a council about whether or not it makes sense to have maybe to understand what both of those are, like what are we required to do and what are we going to be required to do once we pass that threshold? Because I do think this seems like a very, very intensive process. So I guess in trying to think about setting ourselves up for success and being proactive about where we know we're going anyway, I guess I'd love to at least understand that so we can have those conversations. But I guess how do cities normally handle that, or what have you seen?
I mean, a lot of this is brand new. So cities are dealing with it for the first time and in different ways, and having a lot of great discussions and sort of meeting these challenges all together, which is an exciting time to be doing planning. So I guess, well, I'll say that we will certainly come back with a much more detailed, a list of, these are the requirements, and ensure that the city is at a minimum meeting those requirements. From a philosophical standpoint, or just doing good planning, especially because the city of Mountlake Terrace is right at that threshold, but seeing that there is expected growth, especially quite rapid growth, planning just based on a legislative requirement that requires you to do the bare minimum, when you know that the future is going to look very different, looking into the future, especially in a comp planning process, which is meant to be looking into a vision that is a long-range plan into what the future of your city will look like and what you want that to look like. It's easy because of all these new legislations that to get sort of bogged down on the minutia of that, but it's also, I think it's really important to lift yourselves out of that, to understand that this is really your time to envision what the future of your city is, and what other options and innovations and creative mechanisms are there to meet the needs of your existing but also future community.
Incredibly helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it. And then I had a couple other questions. Well, I guess an ask if it's an easy ask, but if it's not, it's not the end of the world. But I guess, so it was interesting to see our current housing capacity and our needed housing capacity broken down by the income brackets kind of early on in the slideshow. Even further back, but and it also hit me. I mean, when you say less than 20% of our current households could afford housing in Mountlake Terrace, like that's hard to hear, right? That, I mean, because I think one of the things for me at least, that I hear most often from our community is how much they love the community that we live in. And it's the people, that form a really important part of that, and that so many of the people who are part of our community today could not join now. That's hard to hear. And so I guess one of the things I'd be curious about, because you talk about the median income, right? And I feel like, I think anytime you talk about an average, right, I was going to say it's a data point that sometimes I feel like doesn't help understand the full story. So I would love to understand, if it is something that we have access to that data, like where do our current demographic percentages fall in those same buckets, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think that would be, I think another interesting data point, right? Like it is one thing to have a median income of 80, whatever it was, but I'd be curious if folks are falling kind of on the far ends of that spectrum, and that's kind of just the middle. So that would just be an ask if it is easy, but if it is not a deal breaker from my perspective to know. And then the other question I had was actually, if you could go back to the slide about the capacity analysis. Because I'm curious about
this one?
I guess, yes, about the philosophy there. So you grouped 80 or 0 to 80% AMI altogether, and then you have the 80 to 120, and then the 120 plus. I guess I'm curious why we didn't break down like 0 to 40 and 40 to 80. And I guess I would just be curious the thoughts there.
Yeah, so these brackets are through the legislative requirements. This is how you need to assess your land capacity. So yeah, it's not my or Leland Consulting Group's philosophy to do it this way, but it is a relatively standard way of sort of understanding low to severely or to extremely low income, moderate income, and higher income in these breakdowns of area median income. But yeah, that's the reason why it's broken down that way.
Okay, it's interesting because I see the data here, and I hear you that our deficit based on this analysis is in moderate to high income housing. I'd be curious how much of that 0 to 80% housing, though, is in the 70 to 80% AMI versus the 0 to 50% AMI, right? Like, I think we know we have more affordable housing than, many areas but I don't think we have a lot of housing that meets the needs of folks who are 0 to 50% AMI. And so it feels like this story, if this is driving where we are going to focus, and our focus is only going to be on creating more moderate to high income housing, I think we are missing the mark. So I will just say that. And so if this is what we have to do to make sure, again, I think that we are meeting the minimum that is put forward, understand. And I will say, I think if you talked to people in our community, and based on some of the other slides you showed as well, I think there is a significant lack of housing for folks who are on the lower end of that income scale. Mm-hmm. So I guess I just want to make sure that still is captured as we are moving forward in this process.
Absolutely. Can I respond, or do time to respond? Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a couple things there. So if you go back to this slide, right, where it actually is broken down by those smaller income brackets. So I mentioned the adequate provisions piece, which is actually about what is getting built here. So that's another piece of analysis that we're doing, and that you actually do have to assess, is there housing getting built or that exists within this 0 to 30, the 30 to 50? And most communities, frankly, are not producing enough of that type of housing, right? And so then that triggers the further process of, okay, well, what are the strategies and barriers and strategies to overcome those barriers that the city needs to take to try and produce more of that? Frankly, at those income levels, it's not something that a city alone can address, right? But there are some actions that can be taken. I will say, going back to these three income bands here. So again, looking at the legislative requirements, you're not actually required to plan for capacity at the highest income level. You just need to at the bottom two. But I think it's important to understand, so what does this mean when you're saying there's a deficit of 2,400 higher income housing units. It essentially means there's an expectation that there's going to be an influx of higher income households into your community. And so if that need isn't met, right, then it would be driving up the costs of other housing, making it even less affordable to the lower income bands. So there's not a need to, from a legislative standpoint, to show that you're going to be meeting that capacity. But if you're not addressing that deficit, it'll have ramifications throughout the housing spectrum. So
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the information.
for sure.
Thank you, Councilmember Murray. All right, Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Hi, thank you. This has been a very interesting discussion, but I just wanted to say a few things. One is the mobile home zoning. We do have 2 mobile home parks that are zoned for mobile homes. And if they sold it to another person, it would still be a mobile home park, unless they come to us for us to change it. So it's up to the city council, the planning commission, and all of that. So if we don't want to change it from a mobile home park, we have that power. Am I correct, city manager? But that's what I was told, at least. And we're one of the few cities that have that. On middle income housing, well, first of all, I really like what was said about the expectations for people with 120 plus AMI, because one of the problems out there is that when a property comes up for sale, you're competing with the people who can. There's not a lot of inventory out there, so the people who can really afford it and have high-paying tech jobs over at Microsoft or Amazon, they're competing with the people who are nurses and teachers and so forth. And so there's just not enough inventory. And I really like this chart, because it really shows you what is really happening out there. And this is the first time I've ever seen it in a chart form. And yes, we do not have enough inventory for the people in the 0 to 80 AMI, but we're going to be right by. We're 15 minutes from Seattle, and we are going to be getting people moving to our city who are probably going to be making $250,000 plus a year, and they are going to be wanting something to live in. And they can live in Mountlake Terrace, they can go to Edmonds, they can go to Marysville, but they're all coming. And we can't ignore the fact that we're going to be getting people of all income levels coming. And so what I'm trying to say is, I really like this report. It's the first time I've seen things in where we can actually look at these the way they in the charts. And it's not a pie chart. There are pie charts in here, but it really divides the income levels. So that's excuse me. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Matsumoto Wright. Do we have any other questions or discussion?
Just want to quickly respond to the mayor's first question about mobile home parks. So yes, if someone was to propose a change in the zoning of a mobile home park, there would be what's called the zoning map amendment that they would have to apply for. So that's I believe it's a hearing examiner process. So that would have to be voted through that process. But someone can't propose to build another residential housing type in what's currently a mobile home zone. So that's purely for manufactured home parks as it stands right now.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right. Any other questions, discussions? Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you all for this presentation. David, I think it's fun and interesting to see this new legislation in action and playing out in your report here. I think it's sort of instructive, even if, as you've gone to lengths to explain sort of Commerce's parameters here in sort of spelling out some of these buckets. I think it raises some important questions for us here in Mountlake Terrace and especially on this dais to consider. I see sort of this the buildable land opportunities here sort of on some of these slides spelled out for town center. I think and there may be a question buried in my monologue here eventually, but I think it's really key for us to look at sort of where we're allowing new things to be built, new units to be built, the things we're sort of assuming about those units, especially if they're multifamily type houses, and assuming that those are affordable. I think if you asked your neighbors, regardless of what they make, I think market rate multifamily buildings are not seen as affordable, and I think that's the case for most folks in that might live here. I don't think they would be severely sort of rent burdened if they moved into a market rate multifamily building. I think that raises some key questions about the standards that we're requiring for multifamily unit buildings being built in town center. I know currently we don't require any percentage of affordability to be any percentage of units to be any degree of affordable, even though we're giving some incentives along those lines. I think we're the question about the standards of House Bill 1110 and the different tiers is really key, because if we're sort of zooming out to look at our city and where there's opportunities to build things, I think we really need to take a hard look at the standards required of cities that have GMA cities that are over 25,000 residents, and we're teetering on the edge there, and we'll be there soon. I think requiring, and for the public, I think this may be controversial, but I think it's important for us to think about building to that tier 2 standard, which would allow for 4 dwelling units per lot, and that's not saying those will be built everywhere, but it's allowing for that, and that would require some degree of penciling out. But like to the mayor's point, if we're going to cater to all sort of parts of this range, those high earners and low earners, I think we need to entertain all housing types, and we need to take a hard look at sort of what's being built and what's being built and where we allow it. Glad that the panel last night and they'll continue to dig into this is looking at our CB areas, but I think we need to look at where we're allowing technically 2 units in our ADU code. Don't think that meets the smell test, if you ask me. In terms of affordability, I think we need to, if we're not going to take the tier 2 standard and that 4 unit standard, we need to really look at what we are allowing and where we're allowing it. But that, I think that brings me back to point that Councilmember Woodard raised, and that is sort of emergency housing and the sort of bottom decile quartile of this, the folks who are making 30% of AMI or 0% of AMI, we should be looking at, we should be partnering with our, our communities of faith in town. We should be looking at how we're meeting this standard, because I know that, as you laid out from the start, folks can't afford, if they were displaced from their housing that they might have in town now, whether they're in a multi-generational household or in an apartment that's relatively affordable regionally, they don't have anywhere to go. And we know that a lot of folks in town, who are homeless, also have jobs. We should be making sure that we're, along with the emergency housing conversation, talking about how we've got services to take care of folks who might need that housing, because it's a, I realize I'm getting a bit far afield, but it is key that we take care of our siblings who are housing unstable, so that they don't sort of fall anywhere farther down in the depths of homelessness, and all the instability that comes with that. So, I think to give some takeaways for this conversation, I'm hoping that by the time we get to this time next year or next summer, I would hope that we sort of have a hard and robust conversation about where we're allowing things to be built, and I'd hope that we'd go a distance, even if it is uncomfortable given our current norms. I think the 4-unit standard is something that we really need to talk about and to consider how we, what that looks like, and what it might mean. And we also need to talk about subsidizing housing, and we can't do that alone. We know it. So I'll stop there, but really appreciate all of your work and the work that's going on in community. I'm clearly stimulated by all the information you're laying out here, and I think it's some of the most compelling for this sort of community conversation to make these sort of long-range decisions. So thank you for that.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Payne Donovan. Any other comments, discussion before we wrap up? All right. I do have a few thoughts. I will try and keep them brief, as I know, as you know, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. First of all, I just want to just quickly say thank you for moving the timeline up a bit to make sure it gets to council. I did have a question to make about when it gets to the Planning Commission. However, I want to make sure the Planning Commission also has sufficient time to deliberate to meet that timeline.
So I do have the timeline in front of me. So we will be going to, so the way that our schedule is working is that between our comp plan advisory group, between planning commission, between coming to city council, we have monthly CPAG meetings from October of this year up until about July. Where we will have a full draft plan completed with comments that we'll still need some revisions by July of 2024. We'll also be going to Planning Commission monthly between October of this year and August of 2024. So we will be starting that full draft plan review process with Planning Commission in July, and it's on our schedule for them to provide a recommendation to forward to council at their August 12th date. So between the August 12th date, getting those final feedback comments from Planning Commission, we would be bringing that draft plan to council in September.
Thank you. I would encourage you, as a former planning commissioner, to bring that to the Planning Commission to start deliberations a little earlier.
So. Yes, of course. Thank you so much. So similar to the process that we're going to be having with council here, where we have modules about all the different topics we're talking about at 4 different council meetings over the next couple months. We will be bringing similar content and draft content to Planning Commission every month as we go forward. So land use and housing for a couple months, and then a month dedicated to transportation, a month on environment and parks. So they will be seeing portions of the plan and be able to provide comment as we go through the process. So by the time we get to that full draft plan, everyone should be pretty familiar with the content, and we can, wrap up those last comments.
I appreciate that. But again, unless you're prepared potentially to hold additional Planning Commission meetings in that time frame, so instead of just their regular scheduled meetings, if they want to deliberate further, I just want to make sure that they have sufficient time. They're given sufficient time to do that. Based on if it doesn't come to them until July and then they have to push it out by August, they may feel constrained. And I just saying that I would encourage you to do it a little bit earlier. I don't want to dwell on it. Sorry, folks, but that's just looking out for our Planning Commission, our Planning Commissioners. I want to make sure that they have sufficient time to be able to provide their input, and I understand that they'll see it regularly and often, as will we, but they deserve the time that they need to be able to provide the input that they want and desire, if necessary. So, all right, the other couple of quick things. I want to appreciate Councilmember Woodard and mentioning the pallet housing. I think, and I agree with Councilmember Payne Donovan, we've got to address the affordability element, the 0 to 30, or 0 to 30 and 50 challenge. And so as we're looking at that, we have talked about pallet housing as well as other types of housing. So just want to throw that back in your court and encourage you to look at those options and how we might address those. Getting back to that deficit slide, I would just change the title on that, because it sends the conversation in a whole different, I think the content of that slide is great, but we have a deficit for housing overall, not just for high income. And that really, that's not a conversation we need to get dragged down in. We do need to address all income levels and provide sufficient housing options and choices for all. And so just changing that title, I think, would help a lot. But the point that you're making is that we don't have the capacity and we need to make some changes is very relevant and spot on. I also agree that we're going to become a city of 25,000 almost within the time that we adopt this plan, potentially. So I would encourage us to look at those requirements. But more importantly, a point that you made during the conversation was likely production. So just because we zone it to 2 or 4, whatever, what's the likelihood that that's going to be produced in all of and throughout the city and all the parcels in the city? So it's not. Therefore, what we want to take a look at is where does it make sense and where do we want to encourage it, and what kind of programs and incentives do we want to put in place to be able to encourage it more in certain areas than in others. Anyway, I really love to go on, but you guys probably did this on purpose tonight. So I will wrap it up there, and I'll bend the city manager's ear instead of dragging on this meeting. But appreciate your time. You guys did a great job. I agree that this is a lot of great content in this presentation, and we are having very important discussions as we move forward, and really excited to see where we go as we move forward in adopting this plan by the end of next year. So thank you very much. Okay, with that, unless there's any final comments, then, Jonathan, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just wanted to mention, so we presented the survey slide and that poster. I just want to acknowledge that we did have volunteers from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission who really volunteered their time to go and post around the businesses. So I just want to thank them and for that effort. That was a big lift, so really appreciate their volunteerism.
Thank you. Indeed. All right. Well, unless there's any closing comments, then we were moving on to Carolyn Hope, I believe, was going to be presenting the review the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission Proclamation roles and list for 2024. Oh, and while we're getting prepared, we'll take a quick break, 5 minutes, 5-minute break. Good. Thank you. All right, we are back online, and Deputy City Manager Carolyn Hope is going to review the proposed DEIC roles related to council proclamations and proposed DEI-related proclamations for 2024. Carolyn.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, and council members. Glad to be here with you tonight. Tonight I'm wearing the hat of the staff liaison to the DEI Commission and here to present some recommendations from them. Tonight we're looking at some proposed new roles for the DEI Commission related to proclamations in supporting your work, and also some proposed DEI-related proclamations for 2024 for your consideration. So we'll review the ideas for their roles, the proclamations, and then have time for discussion and questions. So just as a little refresher, hold on one second. Sorry, I just want to make sure our online audience could see everything. So just as a refresher, in 2020, the City Council formed the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, and this is their mission statement. And I think the topic here tonight is really focused on the second part of this, to foster an understanding that includes and accepts and respects and appreciates each individual member of our community. And really, that is the purpose of some of the work that is proposed here. So the first thing is the commission spent a lot of time thinking about what their role might be related to proclamations. Obviously, this is a council action to have a proclamation, but they were interested in potentially offering ideas for DEI-related proclamations every year for the council's consideration. And by planning in advance, they could consider ways in which we could further celebrate those commemorative dates or celebrations, either through work of their own or partnering with other organizations nearby who are already doing some work in that area. And also to help review the language for the proclamation that usually staff draft for your consideration, and possibly recommending recipients for the proclamations to you. And obviously you may have your own ideas for that as well, but just a recommendation. So those are some of the roles that the DEI Commission are considering for themselves, with your permission, of course. The second part of this is to expand upon some of the DEI-related proclamations that Council has been conducting over the past several years. So the ones that are starred on this table are the new proposals. So Council has repeatedly, I would say, provided proclamations for Black History Month, for Ramadan, Asian American, Native American, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, LGBTQ plus Pride Month, Juneteenth. I'm sorry, there's a star misplaced on here, Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month. The new ones proposed are for Lunar New Year, Children's Day, Welcoming Week, and Native American Heritage Month. And this was, I believe, the first year that we did Native American Heritage Month, at least in the last several years. So thank you for that. And just a little bit of background on this. Obviously, the council already has a great record of celebrating some diversity, equity, inclusion related proclamations, commemorations, and celebrations, but this would be a way to expand on that list in a way that it's meaningful to the Mountlake Terrace community based on our increasingly diverse community members. This is Also a way for, as I mentioned earlier, the commission to start planning ahead about how we could better support these celebrations and commemorations in a more meaningful way. The proclamation is very important. How we present that to a member of the community is very important, but also is there some other action that's taken by the DEI Commission or the city in a broader way that could be a way to reach across cultures, broaden our understanding of each other, and further celebrate those times of the year. So I also wanted to mention that this, of course, wouldn't limit your ability as city council members to add other proclamations. The commission was very thoughtful in trying to limit the number of requests that they had, given that you have many other proclamations besides diversity, equity, and inclusion related proclamations that you consider every year. So with that, I just wanted to take a minute and explain the rationale for some of the new proposals. Lunar New Year is, as you may know, a cultural celebration of many of our Asian community members. In China and Vietnam in particular, it is in some of the countries where this celebration was initiated, it happens during springtime and during the beginning of harvest. So it's a time to celebrate planting and spring and growth. It's a time to celebrate prosperity and of hope. And so this is one of the most popular celebrations in many Asian cultures. And Mountlake Terrace is home to a considerable number of people who are Vietnamese or Chinese or come from that heritage. So this is a really important one to the commission. Another one in April is Children's Day, and Children's Day is celebrated across many different months by different cultures, but the commission decided on April because some of the cultures that celebrate in April are people of Mexican, Turkish, Taiwanese, and Chinese heritage, and of course we have a significant number of those folks in our community. And what this holiday is about is really uplifting and listening to children in our community in different ways, and also advocating for children's rights. Another one that is recommended is Welcoming Week, and this comes also with a recommendation for the city to join an organization called Welcoming America, and their mission is to provide meaningful ways to welcome immigrants and refugees to America and to our local cities. And so cities who join Welcoming America typically participate in Welcoming Week, which is in September. And during that week, cities encourage their partner organizations in town, other agencies, the libraries, nonprofit groups, to all work together towards providing activities and different ways to welcome immigrants and refugees into the city. And that could be anything from providing a service, kind of open house where people get to learn about the services of the city and nonprofits in the area that serve people who might need introduction to different types of opportunities, whether that be jobs or housing or income support. It also could be a very fun event that's about celebrating different cultures and so forth. There's a wide variety of things that could be offered, but that is what Welcoming Week is about. And then although we did celebrate Native American Heritage Month this year, and we appreciate that, they would like to see that moving forward on a more consistent basis as well. So those are the recommendations, and if the council, I'm glad to answer any questions that you have, and then if the council is interested in approving any of these, we would bring this back to you at your next regular meeting on the consent agenda if you wish to see it there.
Very good. Thank you, Carolyn. Yes, any questions, Councilmember Woodard?
First, let me say I appreciate this, and please bring that back to them, mostly because we have not been consistent. We did not do a Black History Month this year, and so just putting that out there, it'd be nice to know that we'll have this in writing. We can actually add some of the ones that we want on there as well, which is my next point. I noticed Women's History Month was not listed, and I'm curious if that was just an accidental oversight or if they talked about it and said that's not one they wanted to support, but I would think that that's something we up here would want, I'll speak for myself, I would want to support to see on that list. So just putting those two comments in play.
Thank you, Councilmember Woodard. Any further discussion? Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and great presentation, Carolyn. I am fully supportive of this and any other sort of good ideas we might have. I think it's important, sitting up here and doing resolutions. I think they're feel good and they certainly mean something to the folks that get them or that receive them. But I think I just like the idea of having DEIC sort of provide some sort of support to staff, hopefully, but also really help sort of impact these proclamations in community, and also I hope that by sort of elevating these dates, especially that we can have some more robust sort of community programming or sort of community conversations about the folks and traditions that make up our beautiful community. So I'm fully in support of this.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne Donovan. Any further discussion? Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I like a couple sentences in the proposal. One is that nothing here would limit the ability of council to add a DEI-related proclamation not proposed on a list. I like that. I also like the sentence where it says the DEI Commission tried to limit the number of proclamations they recommend, considering City Council also has many other types of proclamation that it issues each year. So I like those considerations in that paragraph. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ryan. Any further discussion? Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Carolyn. Appreciated you sharing, doing such a thorough overview of what the DEI Commission discussed, and appreciate all of their thoughtfulness in coming to this list, as well as kind of the additional thoughts they have about how we can broaden the impact of the proclamations that we do make. So very supportive of it. Wanted to just mostly say appreciation. I guess in thinking about potential additional council additions to this list, is that something you want from us now? Is that something that we want to entertain a different time? I think to Councilmember Woodard's point earlier, like I do have a couple of thoughts of my own that was not my conversation, even though I was at the meeting where they discussed it. And so I guess I would just be curious if you want us to share those now, or if you're going to come back at a different point in time to have that conversation with us.
I think that you're welcome to provide them now, and if there are others that come up throughout the year and you want the DEI Commission support with them, if we could just have them a couple of months in advance so we have time to prepare.
Yeah. Okay, so the two that are on my mind, at least, that I would welcome the DEIC's feedback on, one is around National Disability Independence Day. That is celebrated in connection with the annual anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, and so that's at the end of July. And so I think that is an area of our community that is not currently represented in that list that I think I would love to celebrate and think about. And then the other one is International Women's Day. So not necessarily Women's History Month, but I think one of the things that I think we've seen some of our surrounding communities do in recent years is more recognition of International Women's Day. But I think particularly for a lot of our immigrant community, oftentimes in the countries that they are originally from, that is a celebratory, that is a day of significance for the women in their communities. And it's been interesting learning more about that holiday in recent years. And so I'd be interested in us taking a look at that one as well.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Murray. Councilmember Sonmore.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to bring up you mentioning those two, because my first one would be mental health, but Steve and I were talking and we were reviewing a list, and Steve, when we were looking at that list, I couldn't believe all the different areas that were there, and it might be nice if we could look at that list together, because there's things I never even thought of. But my always concern is, and I don't mean this rudely, no good deed goes unpunished. I don't want to leave anybody out is my concern. And so I don't know how you do that, but I think one of the steps is bringing in that list and looking at all the things I never even thought of before that would be a good potential. And so when we're saying that, are we doing proclamations each month for all of these, or are we looking at events? You're on our board, right? I keep on looking over at Steve because he was on the board, and what I guess before we start throwing a whole bunch of things out there, what is the intent? Or is there going to be a celebration for each one, a proclamation for each one, or just the acknowledgement of something?
Do you want me to answer, or do you want to, Karen? I mean, so I think it's both, right? I think I think the commission is very conscientious of, staff's capacity and community capacity and resources. And so I think the thought process this initial year is that we would try to find a couple of opportunities to think about, expanding, in whether that is an event or, some sort of, I think they're open, and they talked about various ideas. So no, I don't think the intention is that every single proclamation would have, a significant body of work to put on an event associated with it. And I do think there was a really good conversation at one point, and I can't remember whether it was actually in connection with this or earlier in the conversations around this, but, I think people feel appreciation different ways. And while there had been conversation, amongst the commissioners in the past around, some who felt very, very strongly that it was important that if we were going to be recognizing, a community through a proclamation, that there be some sort of action associated with it. I think there's also commissioners who feel very strongly that the action of taking the time to recognize as part of our official council meeting, that community is also incredibly meaningful for some. And so I think that was their intention, is to many of these will be proclamations. I think the hope is that all of them will have folks come into our meetings who are part of the community that we are celebrating to be part of that proclamation. But I don't think the intention is beyond, probably picking a couple for this initial year at least to plan around some sort of extended event. I don't know, Carolyn, did I feel free to add what I maybe have missed.
You did a great job explaining, and I did just want to address Councilmember Sonmore's initial comment too, that we did start with a pretty long list of DEI-related holidays, celebrations, commemorative days, and like you said, it's really hard to say no to any of them, right? And so it was just trying to focus on like what was most meaningful in Mountlake Terrace, but certainly all the ideas that you've mentioned, each of you tonight, are definitely something we can work towards. And I think the other thing I wanted to add to what Councilmember Murray was stating was another way that the commission is trying to think about continuing the celebration or honoring these days is maybe, if we can't afford to do an event for each of these dates, that we partner with some of our surrounding cities. So in fact, tomorrow I'm having a meeting with the Linwood DEI coordinator and our chairperson to talk about what Linwood's up to. We know that Edmonds has some, I think they do a Pride Film Festival or something like that. So just trying to find out what's going on in the area where we can be a partner and help promote, and then maybe we do something that the other cities can help promote. And so we're trying to think outside the box a little bit in how we move forward in the activities that help support these events.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Woodard.
I just wanted to say I'm very happy to hear that. That's not outside of the box. We've been saying that from day one. So I'm glad to hear they're acting upon that now. We listed a number of local DEIs that they could go and talk with. I think William might have been the only one who did. Maybe somebody else did. I don't recall, but they didn't get to keep moving on that one. So wonderful to hear the revisiting what I thought was a great idea, not just because it was mine.
Well said. Thank you, Councilmember Woodard. Any other discussion? Then if not, yeah, great topic, great information, great discussion. Thank you. Absolutely agree that we need to celebrate and expand the celebration of of all our communities and every opportunity we get. Look forward to seeing what we do and how we can move this forward. And also, by the way, remind me to, Edmonds also was very interested in working together as a region on these type of events. So remind me to forward that email to you. But if we have nothing further, thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this to us. And next topic is our city manager report. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. A couple things to mention tonight. Tree lighting last Friday was amazing. What was even better was the weather held off until right at the very end. It didn't start pouring rain until about 10 minutes before the event was over, so that was fantastic. We also handed out 436 cookies, and there were still more people coming, so I estimate about 600 people were here. Great event. 435 cookies, because I did eat one. So, we had that. I also wanted to remind everybody in the on the council and in the audience online that the dance recital is taking place on the 9th at Mountlake Terrace High School in the theater. And that's an event that happens every year, and I understand it's pretty well attended, so I wanted to highlight that. Our new city happenings has hit mailboxes and is out, getting good feedback on that from what folks have been telling us so far. And we are setting up the next Terrace Talk, which will be here in this room on the 13th next week, and we're going to be talking economic development. So that should be a great discussion with the community. The utility welcome kit is nearly complete. I will have that for you. We've got a really interesting, I think, new PDF tool where it flips pages like it's a book, and it has the little sound effect. I really enjoy that. So I think that would be, that's going to be well received. And we are working on translations into both Spanish and Vietnamese to make sure we communicate with our community, as well as a contract with a vendor that will translate all of our publications so that we're being as transparent with all our community members as possible. Lastly, I really wanted to thank our Public Works and Parks crews for the work they did this week. During the rain event, pretty substantial rain. There were a couple of roads we had to close earlier this week due to flooding in a couple of local roads. And I just got a letter today that was dropped off by one of the local residents, and I just want to mention parts of it. There were two cul-de-sacs that had flooded out, about 2 feet of water, and our crews were out there. It was plugged up a little bit further down the line, so our crews were out there jetting out the lines, but these folks took the time to write to us and tell us that the Department of Public Works and Parks, for their quick and effective assistance in helping our family deal with the flooding we were experiencing in our cul-de-sac because of the recent rain. When they got up at 6:30 in the morning, the water was 2 feet deep and not very far from their garage door. And the crews were out there very quickly to jet the line and make sure that it would start draining. But it didn't start draining quickly enough. It was approaching their garage door. And some of our public works crews, unfortunately, they didn't have the names, which I understand because it was pouring, came back out and deployed sandbags around their garage in order to keep it safe. So great to get a letter like this. We don't hear that very often, but I'm very proud of our crews for doing the work that they did, and they did a great job. And that's all I have.
Thank you, City Manager. Do we have any questions or further insight and input to the City Manager? Councilmember Sonmore.
I want to do a follow-up question regarding the flooding. Does the city keep, I don't want to say a list, but track of potential mudslide areas? I know we have a couple areas that are very contentious, and I'm assuming that the city engineer, they've passed it on over the years. And I just was wondering what were the plans on how to fix those areas? And if we could see a list of those areas.
Yeah, don't have details on what the plans are, but I can talk with our city engineer. I know we do keep what's called, it's within the GIS system. So Snohomish County keeps track of a lot of that with what we call shape files for our particular area, geological hazard areas, where there's old slumps and things like that, where we know the soil is more unstable than most, and I can provide that to council.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? If not, we'll move on to council liaison reports. Let's start with Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. On the 30th, I had my monthly city manager meeting. The first was the tree lighting, and we talked about that, but thank you to all the city staff and all the volunteers and all of our performers from our local schools. It was a good time. It was definitely a little soggy, but I enjoyed it, and it's always good to see so many people come out and just enjoy that we get to continue to build on that here. I don't take that for granted ever these days, so it was a wonderful event. I went and checked out some of our schools. Were having bazaars the next day, which was pretty neat to go see. So went over to the high school and Cedar Way Elementary, and I think Terrace Park might have one on Friday if folks are still looking for the opportunity to buy all sorts of cool wares from various, small businesses and artists. And anyway, it was wonderful, and I got a lot of my Christmas shopping done, so that was really nice. Today I came from the one time a year my two worlds can coincide. The Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce, where I work during the day, had their public officials reception this evening, so I had a chance to go to that, and it's always a good opportunity to network with some of our King County neighbors, and so I had a chance to chat with the mayor Shoreline, who we met when we went over and had dinner with them here recently, as well as one of our state representatives, Lauren Davis. And so it was really good to have some time with both of them, and appreciated the opportunity to talk about, how much we share, even though we are in different counties. So that is the end of my report. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Murray. Let's do Councilmember Woodard.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to start with gifts. And as it makes its way, if you leave one for the mayor as well, and for our audience member, if you're interested as well, I'd have one for you. I'm going to hold that up so our awesome camera guy can see that. Basically, this is something that VOA Western Washington has produced. A lot of people have these questions. What is 211? What is 988? What is 911? And so basically, it's a nice little play on word that help in 3 numbers away. Notice they're 3 digits, but it's actually 3 numbers. And so it's a Venn diagram. I've left some for the city, and hopefully we'll get these out into the community. I'm passing them out as gifts as one to encourage you to bring it to your place of work, or for you to decide where's someplace you think this should be useful. I've already claimed the library, but you can claim it as well. So you can do that as well. But this would be for you if you're interested. So that stated, let me power through my actual report. On the 18th, Saturday, Ivy League met and did another wonderful job, just an outstanding group of folks. And I start with them to say, I do not know how we choose whoever sets the young person who gets to turn the lights on. It's an awesome idea. We did it last year, we did it this year. I'm so grateful that seems like a tradition. I would like to offer one of our Ivy League youngsters next year. Don't have to do it today, but just kind of want to put that out there. Astrid, you are a rock star. So moving forward, just as everyone is aware that it rained, well, that rain is also cold, which is to remind us that the cold weather shelters are open. And in particular, the one here in the South Snohomish County, which is over in Linwood, it's actually open tonight. I actually dropped the blankets off tonight, so I know it is open and up and running, and it will also be open tomorrow. There's a Facebook page, which is why I'm bringing that up, because I know all of us have platforms and we all have hearts, and it was just going to want to be an opportunity to, well, how can you get this information as soon as possible? Well, if you're on Facebook, South Snohomish County Cold Weather Shelter is how you'd look it up, and it should come up pretty quickly. We just discovered it exists, which is a longer story about. VOA is now the steward of the South Snohomish County Cold Weather Shelter process down here. We're very honored to do that, although we are on a steep learning curve, even though we run 2 others up in the East County, but it's just very different cultures, even though we're all Snohomish County, so it's just something to be thinking about. Wednesday the 29th, I did make our special meeting. Friday the 1st, I was at the tree lighting, and I just want to say, what a cool entrance. Sorry about that, Mayor. I was trying to get there, but my Huskies would not take us into that halftime. So thanks for almost waiting around, and you gave just enough of an intro. I came across. That was a lot of fun. But just a wonderful showing, and everybody who stood out there in the rain, you are amazing folks. I'd also like at some point for us to think about how do we further, or reincorporate, I should say, the tower. It was like, it was our star, and now it's just like, oh, it turns on at the same time, but nobody notices. I'm like, can we live stream it from here or something, like we could see it actually, because we have all these beautiful screens, so just to be thinking about, hey, how do we make sure people know that tower is literally turning on at the same time? Saturday, last 2 folks, almost promised. Last Saturday, Washington West African Center had their grand opening. They are over in Linwood. They do just amazing work. And again, Washington West African Center, or WAWA Center, if you want to look them up. There was a great article actually on them in the paper. You could look it up that way as well. Then on the Monday, the 4th, I was able to rearrange my schedule and come and hang out with Grammy Award winners, which I will leave that for others to talk about, and just know I was starstruck, and it was awesome. We actually were even then invited to go and hear them perform their craft, which was, I was already looking for that, so it worked out very well for me. And then, as you already heard, last night we had the advisory group for the comp plan in this very room or online, and I thought that went really well. The last time we were together, I mentioned that our student rep is holding, that Keo is holding strong and is right in there and giving great feedback. Well, I'm going to embarrass Keo perhaps a little bit here, but know that we record those sessions, and as luck would have it, I was online, Keo was online, and she was the only person online from the group, so all of what the activity we did last night, you can just hear this young person think through what it looks like in 20 years to be here. I encourage you to do that. It was absolutely, I don't know about awe-inspiring, because I already knew Keo rocked, but it was still like, whoa, well, get in there and say what you have to say. And just really good messages, right? And you'll hear a lot of that theme from the others as well, which is just a reminder that we do record those, so you're welcome to join them later if you can't join us in live time. And then the last 2 actually happened today, or at least the last one, I will say happened today. I happened to have, what was breakfast, wasn't it? That was breakfast this morning at Economic Alliance's of Snohomish County's legislative update. And we were well represented as a 32nd LD. We had our Senator Solomon and Rep. Davis, but we also had Chris Collier, who's part of our advisory group, on the panel on the fireside chat. So they had Mountlake Terrace in their hearts and minds, which is a different discussion about the Sound Transit person that was there, which I'm just teasing a little bit. So you had to be there to understand why I was like, what? But we'll leave it there. End of my report.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Woodard. Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I better get to the right month here. Back to November 21st, Tuesday, I was able to volunteer for the Maverick Cares gambling organization on 220th at Aces Poker to hand out Thanksgiving meals to families that have pre-signed up through the school districts, not just the Edmonds, but north of us also. We handed out over 100 dinners to take home and cook in 1 hour. So I was lucky to do that this year. I wasn't able last year, but I was this year. Many of you probably know in Mountlake Terrace, the casino Crazy Moose. Well, the same organization purchased the one that's next to the bingo parlor down in the valley there, we call. And it's called Aces Poker. They also purchased the Red Dragon on the corner, which is closed, but they're going to think about what they're going to do with it. So it's a good organization, and they give back to the community in 3 different states. They own 27 casinos in Nevada, Washington, and Colorado. So they're giving back to our community. So thank you, Maverick Gaming. Then, what did I do? Oh, attended, of course, our special meeting on the 29th of November. And then I was at the tree lighting on Friday the 1st. I was sad there was no snow, so I could not throw any snowballs at any council members, as last year I did, and I knew you appreciated it. All right, and I'm here on the 7th. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Ryan. Councilor Wasonmore.
Thank you. I also attended the special meeting along with everybody else last week, and board's reports include left one where we reviewed medical claims, and we are down 3 people since they have gone to the RFA for our fire, and they'll be doing their claims there. And Park and Rec, one of my favorite places to go. We talked about food forest, and a food forest is a permaculture design that mimics the forest edge. And we talked about fruit trees and growing food with shrubs and plants and helping food-bearing plants and trees growing and pollinators and weed control and less watering and less work is all the benefits for a food forest. And also about a teaching garden and volunteerism and healthy food and increasing biodiversity, but and then eventually becoming food banks and a lot of different information on that. We've got a good host of people that know a lot about that on the board. And then you saw about the Eagle Scouts at the last meeting and what they've been up to. And there was a huge tree cut down in Evergreen on November 17th, and Ken gave us all the information on that and some pictures. And then there's new doggy bags at Lake Ballinger Park, and it's due to the pooper scoopers that have supplied the bags to Veterans Park and our dog park, which is extremely nice of them and extremely useful. And let's see. One of the things that they're looking at is one of the members from the board went over to Linwood because they have a new disc golf and they really like the signage. So they're looking at possibly getting signage in our park. And then we talked about the Evergreen Playfield tennis courts, and I was over there the other day and I saw 2 people in safety vests, and I'm assuming that they were looking at possible work to do, and they were talking to one of the local residents there who lives across the street. And then we also talked about the viewing platform at Lake Ballinger and Halls Creek, but I think maybe we might have to talk later about our dam and the failure. I know you had sent out some information on that. And then, let's see, then we talked about the recreation and the Sonics court. And so lots going on there. And then the budget committee, we did have a concern this evening over about AWC insurance costs, and our city manager said they've doubled in 4 years, did you say? And that is a big concern to our city because it's a lot of money. And lodging tax committee, we have received 2 applications, and of course they're the ones that we've had the same for many, many years, but it's Terrace and the Arts. And then we also wanted to follow up to see what those fundings can be spent for, if we can use them for facilities or building, such as a platform in one of the parks or a staging area or performing arts. And then I also attended the Complan open house and had a great piece of pizza from our local pizza store on 44th. And then on the 5th, that we just talked about is the proclamation to Mark O'Connor. His wife Maggie was also there, and Mark was a Mountlake Terrace high school graduate. And you can find a lot of his information on Wikipedia, but I learned a lot that day, and I was very honored that it was about time that we honored him. Mark started playing the fiddle at a very, very early age. I think his mom got him one at 5, and he was a child prodigy. And he's released 45 albums. He's played for the Grand Ole Opry. His accomplishments are remarkable. And one of his friends from Mountlake Terrace High School, Sean, wanted us to dedicate a skate park to him, but I told Sean many years ago, well, it hasn't been that many, we've looked at skate parks before, but we also supported Briar on their skate park because of the expense of it and liability. So maybe it's something that we want to look into again. But in the meantime, maybe we can take one of his original songs and make it our city song. I think that would be a very neat highlight to do for him. And then another thing I want to let you know, St. Pius Church had their dedication on November 27th, I believe it was, for Mercy House that's located on 56. And Mercy House will serve those in need. And then just one more follow-up. I know when our chief was here last time, he was going to look into maybe putting a letter together on how we can tell our legislators on what help we need with our police department and how we can maybe combat some of the things that are going on to make life a little bit easier on those less fortunate who are being violated by individuals that shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And I'm hoping that we can do something like that and help those in need that are getting robbed, like D&D Meats. I was at an insurance company, and all of a sudden we started talking about D&D Meats, and they knew they had been robbed. I was at work, and they were talking about D&D Meats being robbed. And so there's just certain things that are going on in the legislators that other cities are jumping on the bandwagon to let our legislators know that they need to take note, and the ship that was turned around needs to be turned back around a little bit so we can get a grasp on carjacking, juveniles, and looking at how they're represented in the courts and how they can have less disparity. There's just a whole lot going on that I think a lot of people are concerned about. Also, I just wanted to let you know that we do have Jerry Myers, who was a longtime soccer coach and employee of the Edmond School District, and he was at Mountlake Terrace High School for many, many years. He is being inducted into the Hall of Fame. In fact, they were having a dinner tonight I couldn't go to talk about that. I know Nayland's working on that, but I'm hoping that we could recognize him in an upcoming meeting. And then he was also an excellent soccer player at at Mountlake Terrace High School. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Councilmember Sonmore. Councilmember Payne Donovan.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, I guess I'll start off with our special meeting on November 29th, but also attended our damp tree lighting ceremony, which was a ton of fun. It was great to see everybody out there, and made me really thankful for our maybe not so new plaza, but it was great to see even in inclement weather, so many folks turn out, and really felt the community vibe there. On December 1st, I attempted to attend our Seashore Cities meeting. We had an email outage that morning and couldn't get on there, but did have a chance to review the materials from that meeting, and they've finalized and transmitted their legislative agenda, which for our notes, I think we're soon to do that, and just remind us that the legislative session is right around the corner. And fast forward to Today, this morning, I had a chance to attend a good part of the cops and clergy meeting that was held at our police department training room, and had the pleasure of meeting some new folks there to learn about the work that clergy do in supporting our first responders and those who've either lost someone unexpectedly or been displaced, et cetera. So really pleased that we can host those meetings. This afternoon, I met with our city manager for our regular meeting, and now I'm here. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne Donovan. Mayor Matsumoto Wright. Wrong one.
I keep pressing it. Okay. On November the 21st, I attended a Snohomish County Tomorrow meeting about the Workforce Alliance with our Mayor Pro Tem Brian Wall and our City Manager Jeff Knighton. And on the 27th, I attended the Snohomish County Mayor's meeting, which was held in person in Marysville at Marysville City Hall. And AWC was there as our speaker, Deanna Dawson, and they provided lunch. So it was really, really great to see everyone in person, and we really do get a lot accomplished talking all the mayors in Snohomish County. On the 30th, I attended a meeting with PUD, John Harlow, Brenda White, and Commissioner Wolf. I think that's the first time I've ever met with the PUD. So we're reaching out and getting a lot of stuff done. And on the 1st, I was late to the Seashore Transportation meeting because it wouldn't work on our company email system, and it worked on my phone, so I just forwarded it. It wouldn't open, so I couldn't watch it on the phone. So I just forwarded it over to my other email, and I got in. So I missed the first half hour. It was a fascinating meeting. I just love the information that they give so much, and the legislative part of it. We're Snohomish County, and Seashore is a King County meeting, but we border them. So there is a part in that legislative letter about a pedestrian overpass and a bike overpass for the Lakeview Trail, not the interurban trail. Anyways, so we hopefully, not in my lifetime, hopefully in my son's lifetime, we'll probably have a connecting trail between Snohomish County and King County. And then that evening was a tree lighting ceremony, and oh my gosh, I just can't believe how many people came. And I don't know if we ever ran out of cookies in the past, but it would be nice to know if we can look it up to see how many people came attended in the past. Ken Courtmatch will probably remember. And let's see. And then on the 4th, we gave a proclamation for 50 years in music to Mark O'Connor because he was raised here, went up to all his schooling over here in Mountlake Terrace. And he always mentions Mountlake Terrace when he talks, like in People magazine and so on and so forth. So I just contacted him to see if he would, and I knew that he was coming to the Edmonds Center for the Arts to give a concert on the 4th. And so I thought that, well, while he's here, maybe we can give him a proclamation. And he was so excited. And he and his wife came, and he invited a few of his friends, and got interviewed by MLT News. And then I bought tickets that evening for his concert, and he mentioned the proclamation and the city of Mountlake Terrace quite more than once. Anyways, it was a great time, and I was just really happy to see him. So happy. I met him once before, and we talked about the city of Mountlake Terrace at that time, and that's another whole story. But this is a continuing thing for me, and now it's hopefully gone a full circle. He started his career. He's not going to end his career here, but at least he knows that the city where he grew up is proud of him. And before I close, I'm a member of the Seattle International Film Festival. I got the invitation to go see Boys in the Boat tonight, looked at my schedule, and we have a city council meeting, did not RSVP. And now I find out that the director, George Clooney, is there. So here I am at the city council meeting. Thank you. End of my report.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. All right. I'll be quick so y'all can get going. Just quickly, on the 21st, as the mayor mentioned, Mayor and I and City Manager had a meeting with the Future Workforce Alliance, to where we talked about partnering up and opportunities to help our residents and connect potential workforce with job opportunities. On the 23rd, we had a special meeting. On the 1st, we had the tree lighting. On the that last night had Snohomish County Tomorrow Steering Committee. Earlier this morning had the Puget Sound Regional Council Executive Board meeting, and that concludes my report. New business. Any new business? Councilmember Woodard.
I'll keep it real quick. Unless my math is off, tonight is the first night of Hanukkah. I just wanted to acknowledge all who celebrate, and we support you. Or Steve Woodard supports you, I'll say.
Thank you, Councilmember Woodard. Any other new business? Seeing none, I'm hot to... All right. No further business. I conclude this meeting. Adjourn. You want to hear? I'm